Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 1, 2.
I can get out of the way real quick. She'll bring you all up later, yeah. Good afternoon. We usually get started around 4:20, given the pace at which people come in, but a number of our panelists have time constraints. So I'm going to get us started. This is really a great program, and we want to get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Charles Ogletree Public Forums this summer of 2024, and this one is on Black philanthropy. My name is Richard Taylor, and I'm one of the trustees of the Union Chapel Education Cultural Institute. I'm glad to welcome you. This session was born from a conversation 3 years ago with Sandra Conway at a fundraiser for the mayor of Montgomery, Alabama in West Chop. And she asked if we were interested in doing such a forum, and I jumped on it. Why Black philanthropy? Historically, many in the African American community have not had models of giving beyond their church or religious organizations, and others think that philanthropy is reserved only for billionaires. Guess what? Neither are true. And so our mission has been first to demystify philanthropy and share that small leverage giving can be as important as large donations. Finally, we hope to introduce financial platforms like Fidelity Charity that can educate and facilitate the concept of giving. In addition, we hope to introduce data and research on Black giving that the Schott Foundation has led along with Indiana University. Today, we have a powerful, impactful panel that is divided into two segments, and you do not want to miss either one. Now it's my pleasure to introduce not only a Fidelity executive, but a dear friend who has a broad range of leadership positions at her firm for over 30 years. Sophisticated legal transactions, and by the way, she's only 40. Legislative roles both in Massachusetts and in the halls of Congress. She was a student of the legendary Professor Derek Bell at Harvard Law School, where she learned all about civic and corporate engagement. Most recently, she has been appointed by the governor of Maura Healey to the Massport Board of Directors with oversight of Logan Airport and the Boston Harbor. She's a longtime summer resident in Oak Bluffs. Please welcome my dear friend, Pam Everhart, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Inclusion and Impact at Fidelity. Give Pam a good hand. She's going to run the show.
Thank you so much, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you decided to come in from the beach and come in to hear about giving back. We're going to have a terrific panel today. I'm really excited about our conversation. Two terrific leaders in the philanthropy space, Dr. Michael Lomax. Dr. Michael, would you come on up? Many of you know Dr. Lomax. He is president of the United Negro College Fund since 2004. He has been doing a lot in this space in higher education for several years. He had been president of Dillard, and now doing some incredible work at UNCF. And then I want to introduce my colleague, Jacob Pruitt, president of Fidelity Charitable. Jacob has been president since 2021. He brings a deep expertise in financial services and leadership management, and he brings compassion and commitment and service after serving 8 years, I believe, as a Marine. Yes. So we're going to just have a conversation here about giving back. A lot of us are here at the Vineyard enjoying ourselves, but there are others who don't have the same opportunities and access to venues such as this. And one reason may be because of education. We all know that our people have the potential, but it's having the resources, it's having the social capital, it's having someone to open doors, it's having someone investing in our young people. So we're going to talk a little bit about some trends that we're seeing in giving, ways that you can get involved, and things that we can do from a community perspective. So, Jacob, why don't I start with you as
Okay.
president of Fidelity Charitable? Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of key trends in giving, and particularly in giving to support the Black community?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is absolutely great to be here, see all the Black excellence in the room. So always great to be on the Vineyard. Pam, I think, as I think about, from my vantage point, some of the trends, I want to give you a little bit about where I've come from to help you guys understand what shaped my view and my lens. I grew up in a little small town in West Tennessee, the youngest of 13 kids, and my parents expressed to me very clearly two things. One was hard work and get your education. And they said, you're going to go to college. We don't know how, but you're going to go to college and figure it out. So my first experience with Black philanthropy was through my parents. It started with my parents every Sunday going to church and putting money into the coffins, right, to the church trays. Even though we had tough times, they still did it. It was their commitment, and that rings true to me every day. And then the next thing I would offer up is HBCU experience. I had 4 brothers and sisters who went to an HBCU. When I first stepped onto an HBCU, they went to Tennessee State University. Fast forward, I went to Tennessee State as well, and I had 2 sisters in school at the same time. One of them's here, Elizabeth, and we all graduated at the same graduation. So now I sit here leading this amazing organization with the opportunity to have an impact on a broader scale. The first Black person of color to lead this organization, so I'm extremely excited and proud. So let's get to what I've seen from a trend perspective. The first trend I would say is that giving is up. In our platforms, last year we saw $11.3 billion go to 199,000 nonprofits. So giving is up, and people are excited about it. We saw a 6x increase in giving to Black-owned organizations or Black-owned led nonprofits. We also saw a 5x increase in dollars going to HBCUs. Just a point of reference for you, Fidelity Charitable is the largest grantor to HBCUs. In the last 5 years, we granted $225 million to our platform. So we're proud of what we're seeing and the impact that we're able to have. So what I would offer you as trends as well is that a lot of people are using some very unique tools in the philanthropic sector. And one happens to be a donor advised fund, right? And for all you who
What is that? Yeah.
And we're going to break it down for you. So a donor advised fund is a charitable giving account. It's very similar to a 401k plan, right? Where what you can do is you can go in and you say, I want to give. Instead of giving and writing checks to 1,000 different small organizations, you use this platform. You can contribute cash. You can contribute stock. You can contribute cryptocurrency, private equity, right? We convert it, turn it to cash, and you immediately get a tax deduction. So immediate tax deduction. And then you can also invest along the way. So underneath the platform, there's mutual funds that you can invest in. You can also invest in impact funds, ESG, and you can do it all with as little as $100 to get started. So it's not for the wealthy. These products are extremely popular for wealthy people as well as our counterparts in the white community. We have to begin to leverage these products in a thoughtful way so we can have an impact, because you not only can put money in, but your money grows. Instead of giving $1, you can actually give 2 with the investment growth. So that's the beauty of a donor advised fund. And I'm just excited to be here to give you more insights around how these products work and how they can have an impact for you. I think the other thing that is of interest from a trending perspective is not only are HBCUs up by 5x, we're finding that individuals are contributing to HBCUs to help drive their endowments, right? It's not just operating capital, but trying to fund endowments. We know that that's a big area. I know Dr. Lomax will talk about it here in a bit. And then last thing I would say, when you think about donor advised funds, is that they will give you an opportunity, again, to have a broad impact and to leave a legacy. Leave a legacy for you, your family, and we'll talk more about that. Now, some of the headwinds, I've talked about great stuff. There are some headwinds out there. As much as HBCUs are giving 5X, 225 million, our PWIs are giving billions of dollars. So we have to close the gap. Today we're talking about philanthropy, but we're also talking about closing the gap from a wealth perspective. One of the big headwinds in the marketplace is that for every $100,000 in net worth for a white family, an average black family has $15,000. So there's an 85% gap. So we have to educate, we have to drive, we have to engage to make sure individuals can help close that gap. So just a couple of trends.
Okay, that's great. Jacob, just one question.
Sure.
You talked about how easy it is to set up one of these funds. I'll just say just my giving account. I
Sure.
mean, you use these big fancy words because you're a big fancy guy. So I would just say just my giving account. And what sometimes people just want to do is set it and forget it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what happens with 401k. That's how you do well. You just tell them how much you want to give and it's automatic. Can people do that and the charitable gift fund just kind of tell you, every month I want to give? My daughter is at Howard.
Yep.
She was on the 4-year plan, but maybe 5. But I want it's a great institution, so if she's going to stay there 5 years, that's fine. But I may want to just give annually. But sometimes I forget, getting a little older. Can I just set it up and just every year or every month, however, payroll? Does that work? And I can just send something to Howard or whoever?
What you can do for these platforms is that not only that, but you can actually use them to give to your church, right? You can actually give your tithes through your donor advised funds. I do that as well. I set it up, we'll give it whether it be on a monthly basis, whether it be on an annual basis. You can actually give through these platforms and set them up in a thoughtful way. And what they also do is they reconcile all your giving under one platform. So you know exactly who you've given to, when, where, and how. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Lomax.
Well, first of all, let me say how delighted I am to be here. And also to be on a program with my good friends from Fidelity, who are my good friends at Fidelity. Over the last 4 years, UNCF and historically black colleges have really seen a huge spike in support. UNCF is 80 years old this year. We have raised over that 80-year period. Our first campaign year in 1944, we raised $750,000, which was the equivalent of $10 million in 1944 dollars. It was chaired by John D. Rockefeller Jr. Mr. Rockefeller ain't doing our campaigns anymore. But we have raised over $6 billion in the 80 years since then and helped over 600,000 students earn a college degree. And we have been the largest supporter of historically black colleges, private supporter, and we've been able to be that because we've had such extraordinary support from American philanthropy and business. And the gift that we received from Fidelity 2 years ago to establish the Fidelity Scholars Program was $190 million, which took us into the top 50 charities of that year, according to Forbes magazine. We're looking for another boost. But what I will say about this, I think this is only a good news story. We're seeing, because of people like Pam and Jacob and others in positions of leadership in American financial corporations, in American corporations, that they're helping to set the philanthropic priorities of those organizations, which a decade ago, 2 decades ago, would not have people looking like them with their backgrounds saying, this is where we should be giving back to community. So at the very highest levels of corporate America, we now have friends. And it's not just that we have friends who are in positions of leadership, we have friends throughout those corporations. And we receive a significant amount from employees who are having annual campaigns in their companies. But I want to talk about just my view of what I'm seeing. I've been at UNCF for 20 years. When I first got there 20 years ago, people said, do we still need black colleges? Do we still need UNCF? You know, this was a different time. And those of us who have spent our entire careers, as I have, in the historically black college community know that the quickest way for us to move from poverty to the middle class is with a good education and good employment. And that's the story, and you'll be hearing from John about this. That's really what HBCUs do. They take folks at the bottom end, and everybody's talking social mobility, and we move them up within one generation. The big challenge for so many of the young people who go to college is not their ability to do the work, not their determination, not their grit. It's really that they have to borrow so much to get their education that by the time they get their education, they have debt which will be on their backs for the next 20 years, and they can't take the next step, which is to build wealth. And so a large part of what we're doing today is providing scholarships, yes, and that's what Fidelity is doing, but it's also to influence public policy. And part of the influencing of public policy was to get the President of the United States to really clean up the federal financial aid programs and allow students who were working in government or in the nonprofit arena to get a public service, have their public service help remove their loans debt. And the largest beneficiaries of that public service program have been black borrowers, because we tend to go into government and into the not-for-profit sector. Here's the good news about what's happening in the black community. We are a generous community. We give to church, we give to causes in our communities, and we give to education. And UNCF has about 250,000 donors annually. Most of them are at the lower level of the less than $1,000 a year. But these are people who are writing those $20, $25 checks every month, every time we send them a note, and they're sending us something back. But what I'm seeing now is the growth in the pyramid. Increasing numbers of black Americans who are giving $1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 25,000, and giving these major gifts every year. So we are generous as we move up. What I like so much about what Fidelity is doing is that it is encouraging people to give regardless of the amount and begin to build the philanthropic muscle so that they just do that as a regular part of who they are. And they give back. And I love the fact that what you're going to do, because you don't always capture, if you go give in church, you don't always get a tax write-off for that, because you got to estimate how much you have given. But if you're sending that in through your Fidelity account, you're going to get 100%, and you have documentation of what you have sent to the Union Chapel. Well, no, and you can get information about the charity that you want to contribute to. Is this a highly rated charity? What percentage of the gift will go toward program? What will go toward administration? So you can become an even more informed donor. What I like about what's happening in African American philanthropy is that we're becoming very good stewards of our dollars. And we're increasingly making decisions to give where we believe we will have impact. HBCUs are getting a lot of that benefit. But we have to tell our donors, what will this do for graduation rates? What will this do for retention? What will this do for making sure that the students have the materials that they need to do their work? So I'm seeing much more thoughtful decision making on the part of our black donors. There are two members of that class that I want to talk about. UNCF annually receives between $5 and $15 million in legacy gifts. And these are gifts, these are the last, so this is an estate gift. And those gifts are very often from people who are school teachers, government employees, who have worked all of their lives and have saved, and they have a home, or they have a retirement plan, and they make UNCF the beneficiary. So our people in our community believe in church, and they believe in education, and they give to both. What we're also seeing, in addition to people like that who are just the backbone of our community, the people who don't make a lot of noise, but just are doing serious business every day, we're now seeing great wealth in our community.
That's very true.
And so some of our largest gifts have come from black people who have made significant, who have built significant wealth. Obviously, the poster child from that is a guy named Robert Smith, who, and I was at the Morehouse graduation, sitting in the audience with his family, and I could tell he was going to do something. I just didn't know what he was going to do. And what he wound up doing, I think, was $39 million in debt relief for the graduates in that class. I think that Robert was sending a message to Black America that we have to do this work ourselves. What he didn't say is that he had given $50 million to UNCF to provide scholarships, one of the largest gifts we've ever received from an African American for a scholarship program. Wow. So I think what you're doing now to facilitate informed giving in the black community is going to reap significant results for black-led and black-focused charitable organizations like our historically black colleges, like the United Negro College Fund.
That's great.
Well, I think you did that's a commercial for us.
Yeah,
I
I
hope
love
you
it.
were recording all that. That's great. So I think I want to put you on the spot a little bit, Jacob, because you talked about the gap, the wide gap in giving in regular organizations and black-led organizations. And so you have this big role at Fidelity. You can drive impact. You have a lot of influence. What is Fidelity Charitable doing to help narrow that gap specifically and intentionally and with your name on it?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Well, first of all, as you speak to the gap, you should recognize that of the large foundations that are out there, only 2% of the dollars that come out of those foundations go back into the black community, right, in some form or fashion. So there's a huge gap. So 98% goes somewhere else, and we have huge needs. So from a Fidelity perspective, there are a couple things that we're leaning into. Number one would be, first of all, I would say we have to start here, right? We have to start as a collective in closing the gap in our community. That's number one. So that's why we're showing up at places like this to talk about these unique tools, products that we can offer that can help close the gap. The other thing that we're looking at is that we're trying to change the demographic of our donor base. Today, the average donor in our platform is a 65-year-old white male, right? So that means that the individuals in the platform are going to grant to the organizations that they are passionate about. And it's going to go to the East and the West Coast, and it's going to go to PWI organizations, right? So for us, it's like, how do we reshape the donors? That means that we need more individuals like you sitting in this room using the platforms so we can get dollars to small grassroots nonprofits who have the need and who are doing very unique things in the community. Another area that we recently leaned into, we launched a Catalyst Fund, and that fund was launched in 1994. We've given out about $81 million to the philanthropic sector, And we focused on really two areas, and we're not done. We got a lot of work to do. Two areas. Number one, it's around connecting organizations or donors who have potentially large sums of money with aspiring nonprofits, right? Who can do the work, who have a track record of doing the work. We're also focused on engaging specific geographical locations. We've done the research, and we've identified 16 states across the U.S. where the biggest need is. And those states are in the south central part of the U.S., south, that means down south, and they're in the Mountain West. And when you think about giving, they receive 3 times less charitable support than any other states across the country. Most of the dollars go to the East and the West Coast. So what we've done is that we've set up a couple things. One is that we've begun to invest in an organization that drives giving circles. As we know, giving circles are organizations that will take your time, resources, and your talent, and they will help drive resources to small, grassroots organizations. So we're leaning into that space. And then, I want to get it right here because I've got some names I need to make sure of. We're partnering with the Community Investment Network. They're leaning in, they're helping us build these giving circles because we know people of color lean into giving circles. And then we also were working with the Giving Black Alliance. Matthias here. It's an organization that we're leaning into, and we're helping them expand their brand nationally so they can have an impact in regards to philanthropic giving and what we're doing across the country. There's another organization that we've created a strategic partnership with. It's called the Soul of Philanthropy. And it's an organization that's really unique, where they're telling the story of Black philanthropy, which are hidden stories that should be out in the media, and they have exhibits that move throughout the country, and we're trying to get the word out. So we're trying to put our money behind our Black community. We're trying to lean in. We're trying to make sure that there's an opportunity to make a difference.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. So I'm going to let Dr. Lomax have the last word.
You know, we were at another program yesterday, and we heard from, I think, one of the most creative Black business leaders in the world, yes. Melody Hobson, yes. Of Ariel. And she told the story of how they get students at Princeton to give at 100% on graduation. And, you know, I said to myself, we're the United Negro College Fund. We work with colleges. We should be doing everything we can to build a tradition of philanthropy among our college graduates. And I think that that's something that we ought to think about partnering on innovatively to create those giving circles, not 10 years after graduation, but at graduation. So if I think we have to, I think that our biggest opportunity right now is to shape the philanthropic decisions of the next generation. And you build that muscle by working it out, and you've got to learn to use it. I remember that when I went on the board of my local United Way, and I thought I was doing a big deal to give $500 a year to United Way, but I knew that they had something called the Alexis de Tocqueville, and that was $10,000 a year. I said, well, I'll never be able to give $10,000 a year. But I became, over time, a de Tocqueville giver. And I became that by just working my way up. And then I decided, as much as I want to give to United Way, I really want to give to the United Negro College Fund. And unfortunately, my giving is 2.5 times that amount annually. And, you know, it's really just a question of priority and values. And I think we know that our community is a generous community. It believes in the work that our institutions do. We've just got to help them build the muscle. And I wonder whether we could work together with our graduating classes to incent giving so that every time a class graduates at all 102 of our HBCUs, because those are a lot of the states where we're going to be working, that they will be somehow incented to give at that point and to continue to give in the years to come. And that's, that's the
So you start early.
that's
right?
the performance economics we've got to work on, brother.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I think that's a wrap. I want to thank Dr. Lomax and Jacob for this conversation. In terms of the Fidelity Charitable, on the back of your fans, there's a QR code to find out more information. And I would just leave this with you. If you know young kids who are going to be graduating soon for college, in terms of a graduation gift, set up a donor advised fund, charitable gift fund. It can be a small one, you set like $100, and then they can give out of that to their college and give out monies out to other charitable organizations. You start to teach them, and it doesn't have to be large amounts, but it's building that muscle of giving so that they can continue to support our Black-led organizations and our HBCUs.
It's about establishing a legacy, right? Early,
Yes.
right? I do it with my 5 boys. We sit around the table. We let them pick a nonprofit. They get to give, and it creates a legacy of giving, and that's what you want to create for your families. So,
Okay. All right, I think John Jackson is going to come up, the next speaker. I think you have a plane to catch,
do
right,
have a
Dr.
plane to
Lomax?
catch.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Jacob, I think you got a statement.
It is a blessing to be in a room full of givers, and we have all been blessed to give. Some of us give to an HBCU, others give to Mercedes-Benz. Some of you have been blessed to be able to give to both, but we are all givers. I just want to take a moment of personal privilege to thank Richard Taylor and Karen for this 3rd symposium, annual symposium, Charles Ogletree Symposium. Charles Ogletree, Professor Ogletree, was a friend. He was a mentor. He loved Charles Hamilton Houston. Charles Hamilton Houston was the architect of Brown v. Board. And Professor Ogletree's love for Houston was only second to his misplaced love for the Dallas Cowboys. But he started the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, and they would come on the vineyard and host these types of discussions. And Professor Ogletree would often tell me, remind me of what Charles Hamilton Houston said, that a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. And he would remind me, just don't have the conversation, but build from the conversation. So over the last 2 years, we've had some pretty robust conversations. And we set out as a metric, Richard, Karen, and I, we talked about perhaps at some point we might want to develop a dashboard so that we could move from conversation to begin to track our progress. And I'm happy to know that we are here. I reached out to Jacob. We had a conversation. He liked the idea. I reached out to our friends at Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. They have the experts, the ability to collect the data, and they're here. And I reached out to Dr. Giselle Shorter, president of Nellie Mae Foundation, because she had a little money to help us pay for the data. And so I want to bring forward 2 people to welcome into this conversation. The first is LaCoya Gardner, who is the director of programs at Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And she is going to share with us the data that they collected that's a part of the Black Philanthropic Giving Dashboard. It looks at giving trends, it looks at the impact of giving, as well as Black leadership in institutional foundations across the country. And because we just don't want to look at the data, we know we have the money, how we spend the money actually matters. One of the things that happened over COVID is that life expectancy declined. That's a no-brainer. But it declined the most for African Americans. And there are counties across the country where the life expectancy is 90 for an African American, and other counties where the life expectancy is 70. We need to understand what type of ecosystem and what are the leveraged investments that are necessary in order to ensure our most precious commodity, life itself. So I asked my friend, Dr. Andre Perry, who is a senior fellow at Brookings Metro, to join us in this conversation to talk a little bit about the work that he has done around life expectancy and investments that really matter. So I want to ask LaKoya to join us, as well as Dr. Perry to join us, so that we can build from the conversation. Please help me in welcoming them.
All right, so I see that we are in the house of the Lord, and I know that my preaching style can come upon me, so I'm going to have my handy-dandy cell phone right here to make sure that I am staying on track. So with that being said, my name is LaKoya Gardner, and I am the Executive Director of the Mays Family Institute on Diverse Philanthropy that is actually located at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, which is the first and the only school that's actually dedicated to research in philanthropy. And so I do want to provide a very special thank you to Dr. John Jackson, who of course is the president and CEO of the Schott Foundation, and then also Dr. Giselle Shorter, who is also the president and CEO primarily of the Nellie Mae Education Foundation. So without your support, this project will certainly not be able to move forward. And so as I move forward over to the next slide, I stand here today greeting you all in honor of Black Philanthropy Month, which I am delighted to rejoice in, primarily as we look at an annual global event that really recognizes and campaigns and promotes Black philanthropy. It promotes charitable organizations and also communities. And so although Black Philanthropy Month is now global, I'm gonna say, let's not get it twisted. In the words of Tracy Webb, we have been giving since the beginning of time. And so with that being said, we know that giving and receiving for African Americans has its roots primarily in West Africa, where pre-colonial traditions, where our community and sharing deeply in one another has been certainly ingrained. But despite enduring the harsh realities of family separation and brutalities of our past, these values have persisted and continue to shape the way Black Americans engage in philanthropy. So as we move forward, I would like to provide what we call the Black Philanthropic Giving Dashboard. And this is where I'll provide an overview of the background and the purpose as we move over to the next slide, following methodology and then also data sources of this information. So you will then hear key findings and implications behind the research as well. So moving forward, we will take a look at the dashboard background and the purpose. Black philanthropy giving among individuals and organizations and foundations have experienced an increase primarily of visibility and then also evolution as well, pertaining to addressing racial inequalities, also to promoting social change as well, and really amplifying marginalized voices and empowering grassroots movements as well. And so the purpose of the dashboard in detail is to have a developed track as well as monitor data and trends based upon the growth and impact of Black philanthropic giving, with the hopes of being able to catalyze growth and really accelerating the impact of Black philanthropy. So today, the dashboard content will be presented in a form of a presentation. However, within the next couple weeks, we will be able to actually upload this information via web page so that this is available to everyone as well. So moving forward, we have aimed primarily to include information, and please forgive me because I get extremely excited as a researcher regarding academia, and so I will try to not get in my academic bag today and really try to focus primarily on the trends as well. But we are aimed to include information on both the high net worth and everyday donor, so we're able to distinguish the two. And so as we move to the next slide, I would like to emphasize what we call everyday donors, and then the difference between high net worth donors as well. So everyday donors are primarily donors without significant financial resources who truly are able to contribute to charitable causes. These are donors who are less likely to make headlines, but their collective generosity still remains very important to the philanthropic landscape. And then additionally, the technical definition primarily of high network donors, as per our Bank of America research studies, includes households with an annual income that have more than $200,000 and or primarily a net worth of more than $1 million. And these were individuals who we included within our study. So as we move forward to our next slide, you will be able to see the data and the sources that we were able to utilize. So first and foremost, it's the Philanthropy Panel Study. This is actually our largest data set, primarily that measures the philanthropic behavior. And then also it allows us to track and stay with these specific households. And so we are able to look at their behaviors throughout their entire lifetime. Next will be the $1 Million List, and this is going to be able to provide us and has been able to provide us a very unique information on giving by Black donors and also non-Black donors at the level of $1 million or above. We also have the 2023 Bank of America study, and this reveals trends in giving and voluntary behaviors primarily through affluent households during the year of 2022. And these main findings will also be included. And then lastly, the very last report that we included was also the Council on Foundations. And this particular association is a membership association that primarily supports over about 900 memberships. It allows us to primarily be able to take a look at the staff compositions and also the compensations as well pertaining to race, gender, and sexual orientation. So as we move on to our next slide, based upon our data sources, I would like to provide a few key findings. And as we move forward, our very first finding is upon our giving behaviors of everyday donors. So on our next slide, you will be able to see that based upon data from our Philanthropy Panel study, that although we heard that, yes, giving has increased over the past couple of years, here at Indiana University, we get a distinct opportunity to look at decades upon decades of giving. And so based upon this particular Philanthropy Panel discussion study primarily, it has an opportunity for us to look at year 2000 to year 2018. And so based upon this research data, the overall giving rates have been declining since year 2010. And this is primarily within all race and ethnicity groups. And so when we look at the decline through households and their giving rates and how they have occurred, we include the socio-demographics as well. And so that means we're including their race, their age, we're also including income and education level. So as you can see, based upon this particular data, about 50% of African Americans gave in year 2000, and then that had decreased to about 1/3 giving in year 2018. Most of the decrease, of course, in giving participation occurred after the Great Recession in year 2008, but those trends did not slow and they did not reverse, even once the economy had recovered primarily from the recession as well. So furthermore, as we did a deeper dive primarily into particularly why Black African Americans decreased their giving, and what we found is that African Americans felt that the organizations that they were giving towards did not respect their personal information, and trust-based philanthropy was also a part of that. So as we move forward to the next slide, we see that at the heart of giving for many diverse donors, specifically African American donors, places of worship play a huge role in lives of African Americans. But giving to secular purposes have also been declining across all races, but there has been less substantial as compared to declining in giving to congregations. So again, you can see the difference. African Americans giving at about 38% and then decreasing to about 25% from year 2000 to year 2018. So looking at the next slide, we can also see as well that giving to religious purposes and their giving rate overall, that has increased from year 2000 to 2018 as well. And so as shown in year 2000, Blacks, African Americans were giving to religious purposes at a rate of 40%, but now during that year of 2018 was at 21.8%. However, when we look at the overall, and as we transition to our next slide, when we look at the giving amounts of percentages of income, looking at the overall view of this, African American donors on average gave 3% more of their income to charity. So this is the highest amount among race and ethnicity groups. And additionally, Black African Americans were significantly more likely to donate gifts from their family foundations, from charitable trusts, from other charitable giving vehicles compared to non-Black African Americans. And so research shows us that African Americans like to give towards very specific entities, and these are primarily towards education, it's also towards religion, towards reciprocity, and towards self-help areas as well. And so as we move forward, another key finding was primarily within the $1 million plus gifts. And moving forward to the next slide, when analyzing the $1 million gifts that support Black African American initiatives and communities, whether these gifts are from African American donors or whether they're from non-African American donors, the $1 million list shows that there has been a huge boom, as we heard earlier, in philanthropic dollars specifically towards historically Black colleges and universities. One in particular, as you can see from these current years, from 2017 to current 2024, you can see that there's a particular year where there was a heightened amount that was given towards that. And so Mackenzie Scott, we know, of course, the name Mackenzie Scott, she had an opportunity to provide those fundings, and she gave a range of $4 million to $50 million. And we've seen a visibility from individuals who wanted to give $1 million gifts as well based upon the gift that Mackenzie Scott had provided. As you can see, there's also a huge surge in giving to HBCUs during the year of 2020, and majority of that funding did come from Mackenzie Scott during that time frame. So as we move forward to the next slide, looking at primarily HBCUs and the average gift to HBCUs, Howard University's College of Medicine and Morehouse School of Medicine will receive a gift of $175 million. And then additionally, Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science will receive $75 million from Bloomberg Philanthropies in 2024, which these are the largest single donations to HBCUs in history during the 2024 timeframe. So as we take a look at our third giving key findings, and this is pertaining to giving patterns of affluent donors. And so as we dissect specifically the giving patterns of affluent donors, we utilize what is called the 2023 Bank of America study. And this is based primarily on a national representative random sample of about 1,623 wealthy U.S. households. This includes primarily a deeper analysis based upon their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, and their ethnic identity. And so this expands our methodology, and it enables us to really do a further exploration primarily of the trends and the strategies and the behaviors among these affluent populations. And so as you can see, as you look at this particular slide, there are 213 Black African Americans, wealthy U.S. households that were included out of the total sample of 1,623 individuals. And moving to the next slide, when asking the affluent households who gives to affinity groups, and when we talk about affinity groups, these are primarily, this will consist of groups of people who share a common interest, a common goal, and an identity. So these groups are often formed around shared characteristics such as race, age, gender, sexual orientation, For example, at Indiana University, we've created what is called the Black Philanthropy Circle, which is an affinity group that is consisted of African American alumni that gives to help support primarily Black, African American, or diverse students. That is an example of what an affinity group is. And so taking a look at this particular chart, you can see that 9% of the sample they actually give to Black African American causes, and 53% of them are African Americans. And so as we look at primarily just the philanthropic behavior and the change, and we ask these individuals, will the future change based upon the experience of the coronavirus pandemic, based upon the social justice, injustice movements? And these individuals stated that their future of their philanthropic behavior would be more directed towards specific issues. It would not change, but it would include fewer restrictions on use of funds and include a less burdensome application and review process compared to non-Black African American institutions. And as we move forward to the next slide, we've also identified an intersection to philanthropy and impact investing. So primarily, impact investing seeks to address social changes, environmental issues, or community development while still being able to aim for profitability. And so areas of interest typically will target education, healthcare, affordable housing, renewable energy, and sustainable agriculture. But as you can see, 22% of Black African American participants participate in impact investing. And African Americans significantly are more likely to consider their sustainable impact investing to be in place in some or all of their charitable giving compared to non-Black African Americans. And last but not least, primarily of the key findings, another key finding is in regards to Black leadership within the philanthropic sector. So as we transition to the next slide, we can see primarily that leadership roles throughout the philanthropic sector. We've been able to analyze foundations, which is primarily called Councils on Foundations. And so this is a report that contains demographic data on 10,733 full-time staff members across 38 distinct positions from 957 grant makers. So we've been able to take a look at the staff composition and the compensation within the United States. This particular graph that is shown right now really takes a look primarily at full-time staff by an asset and size of millions. So as you can see, foundations that has less than $5 million in assets has 4.2% of full-time Black staff members. Foundations that has a $5 to $9.9 million in asset has about 6% of full-time Black staff members. And in just about every category listed, full-time Black staff members are represented the least compared to white or other minority groups. So moving forward to the next slide, when we take a look primarily at the reported race and ethnicity of full-time staff by staff size, you can take a look and see that 20 or more staff sizes, Black representatives are only available at 15.5%. Any staff size between 10 and 19, Blacks represent 10.7. And as you can see, the smaller the size of the actual staff, the smaller the amount of Black representation that takes place. Looking at the very next slide, this graph represents race, ethnicity of full-time staff positions. And so as noted, you can take a look and see that there's Black executives. They represent primarily about 9.9% compared to 79% of whites and 11.1% of other minorities. Within the finance department, Blacks represent 7.7 compared to 73.7%, and then 18.6% compared to other minorities. You can see the highest amount of Black representation is in the program area at 17.4%, but you can still see the difference between, of course, whites who are at 57.3% and then 25.3% compared to other minorities. So as we move forward to our next slide, after gathering all of the data and learning about all the information, And looking at the data sets, here are the following implications that we found. So moving forward to the next slide, primarily that first and foremost, although philanthropy has always been deeply rooted in our Black culture, it has also received increased visibility in recent years, and that's been due to the reckoning surrounding social injustice issues. We've also learned that there are so many different nuances to the sector, and first and foremost, although overall giving rate of households has seen a decline over the past couple of decades, affluent Black households have engaged in philanthropy to a great extent. And outside of the giving, we've also noticed that there still appears to be a huge gap in formal philanthropy space. So for example, the Council of Foundation data shows the lack of Black populations in leadership roles. And so while there have been some improvements within this area, we still need more Black representation in leadership roles within the philanthropic sector when it comes to organizations, when it comes to foundations, and when it comes to boards as well. It's also extremely important for us to keep in mind that primarily we should look at various forms of giving, and we talked about that. We heard that earlier from our two panelists, and that's in regards to formal giving, so giving circles, donor advised funds, impact investing. Those are all going to be extremely vital when measuring the role of Black philanthropy. But let's not forget about informal philanthropy. As Black African American, we understand it best. So informal philanthropy and the distribution of informal ways that we're able to give, that consists of giving of your time, giving of your talent, giving of your treasures, and we like to add the 2 additional T's on there, and that's giving of your testimony. So how can you, as a philanthropist, utilize your voice? And then giving of your ties, and that is making sure that those within your network, that you're also able to introduce them to philanthropy as well. And yes, we have seen so many different challenges, and these challenges have shown to have limited access to resources, systemic barriers to wealth accumulation, and disparities in philanthropic infrastructure. However, these challenges, there still remains opportunities for us to address challenges through increased investments, collaborations, advocacy to further advance Black philanthropy. So with that being said, and as we transition to our next slide, and actually the next 2 slides, this concludes our presentation on our Black philanthropic giving dashboard. I would like to again acknowledge both of our funders for their support as well for making this information happen. So thank you all.
Thank you, LaKoya. I want to ask you to just remain up here so that when we open up for questions, you can fill those questions. You left us with a lot of nuggets. I bet you all didn't know there are white African Americans, so we have to say Black African Americans as a part of the data set. But I want to move to Dr. Perry. We heard that Black African Americans give a larger share of their income. Can you talk about the degree to which your research has surfaced the areas that make the most impact as far as investments to improving the life outcomes and life expectancy for African Americans?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Andre Perry, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution, and some of the things I study, I look at life expectancy. And in this discussion, it really is around where are we investing that matters most? What are the investments that is actually going to extend your lifespan? About 2 years ago, I entered into a partnership with the NAACP. We developed this platform called the Black Progress Index, where we looked at life expectancy by zip code. We compared Black people to Black people around the country. The reason why we compare Black people to Black people, because when you compare Black people to white people, you often lose sight of where there are gains in the geographic areas. And as John Jackson said earlier, we see a difference. If you live in parts of Maryland, where I live in Prince George's County, the average life expectancy is about 79. Montgomery County, a few miles up the road, it's 81. But if you live in Baltimore City, we know that it's about 67. And Selma is about 65. So we see wide variation. But what we did, we wanted to see what are the determinants, the social determinants of health. So we fed as many databases as we could find in a machine learning algorithm, Lasso, if we have statisticians in the audience, fed it through Lasso, and we did what we would consider a theoretical model to get at the most important factors. Now, some of them are not a surprise. My son has just entered the building. Son, you're late. I can't believe you're late to my presentation. You will be punished. No, but we looked at the most important variables impacting life expectancy. Some will surprise you. The number one predictor of life expectancy is the share of black immigrants in your county. Now, some of that is what we would call a compositional effect. So black immigrants in general are healthier and wealthier than our native black counterparts. And so just by demographics, you'll see an increase. But what we found is that black Americans that live proximate to immigrant groups actually have better outcomes. So there's something going on in the mix. And we don't have to get into debate. You know, we have these wild debates of who's better, African immigrants, Caribbean, West Indian, or African Americans. But there is something special going on with immigrants. So it defies the narrative that that immigrants are taking away from our communities. They're actually adding value to our communities. The next social determinant, no surprise here, income. The higher the income in a geographic area, the longer the life expectancy. Next one, no surprise here, home ownership. More home ownership, greater life expectancy, greater a sense of stability in home. You can get to work consistently, greater life expectancy. Now here's where, again, another piece that no surprise here. Education, both in terms of K-12 and higher ed. The higher the percentage of folks passing your state math exams, higher life expectancy. The share of folks graduating from college, higher life expectancy. And it's intuitive. You get more education, you're generally making better choices, getting better incomes, you have access to different markets. No surprise there. Walkability. Another, when you live in walkable neighborhoods, you know, I'm staying right over here down the street, people walking past, saying hello, getting exercise. There is something valuable about being able to walk around your neighborhood. It literally adds life. Now, here's where it was a little bit of surprise. Distance of your Facebook friends in a county. Right? Now some of this, there's some correlations here, meaning the average distance of Facebook friends, you add up all the Facebook accounts, you look at literally the miles distance between the friends. Some of it is intuitive. If you are educated, guess what? You have friends all over the country. You have larger networks. The biggest takeaway there is social networks matter, right? When you have deep social networks, deep social ties, you live longer. Now, here's one that surprised me, but it may not you. The share of business owners matter. So it's another positive predictor. Now, let's go into the negative correlates, the things that take away from life expectancy. Air pollution. If you live in areas where there's significant air pollution, it takes life away. Population density, and this is actually a surprise. Typically, the more dense places means you're getting more educational opportunities, more job opportunities, but for black people, it's a negative correlate. So generally, I believe that that's the result of segregation. If you are in a dense area and you're not getting access to the educational job opportunities, that's going to be a drag on life expectancy. Here's another one. Generally no surprise here, but I want to explain this. No father present. The share of households with no father present, it's a negative drag on life expectancy. What we did find, after controlling for a lot of factors, black fathers actually spend as much time, or if not more, than our white and Hispanic counterparts with their children. But they live apart more, which negates that connection. And some of this is intuitive. As I stated earlier, income is one of the strongest predictors. When you split a household, you get less income, right? So it is a factor. Now here's one I know the folk, before you throw your Bible at me, I'm going to qualify this. The share of church members. The higher the church membership, the lower the life expectancy. Now I'm going to explain before you throw stuff at me, right? Okay, now there is a compositional effect. Church members in general have higher shares of obesity, right? The chicken plates, all that stuff, right? But that's not the church. Obesity is more ubiquitous, but I'm joking. And there's something to be said that if you say, Jesus, take the wheel for everything. We saw this during the pandemic, where it was, I'm going to do this because God said. There's something connected there. But more importantly, I think what is happening in this statistic is that it tells me that church communities are under significant stress. And it's coming out of the wash. People are coming to church struggling in general. That church communities are under attack economically, socially, and it impacts life expectancy. So there's this, for those in medicine, you know this concept of allostatic load, that stress impacts the body, and it takes away your life, years of life. That is true for communities as well. And the church community is stressed out. Just two more things that I want to explain, and I do not shy away from this. Gun-related fatalities takes away years of life. Now, in the absolute, like you're literally taking away life expectancy. If in a county life expectancy is 80 and you have people dying at 22, it reduces the number. But what is lost in all that is just an enormous amount of stress in our community that happens when someone loses a life because of violence. Now, I'm going to close out here because you can actually search your county all over the country and look at where you are. We see people when online. We can see that people will click in Selma versus Montgomery County and all these different things, comparing places to places. But what I've learned from this is that the communities that we have here, when people come, they're walking, they're talking, they're spending, they're owning, they're preserving community, that can be anywhere in this country. We can create the kinds of worlds we want, right? This is not some magical place. It is created through our work. And nothing grows without investment, nothing. I don't care if you're talking about education or business development. If you don't invest, you won't see growth. My favorite quote in all the world, I say it like it keeps my teeth white, comes from Tic Tac None, who said, if you're growing a head of lettuce and the lettuce isn't growing, you never blame the lettuce. You look to see if the soil's enriched. You look to see if you're getting sunlight. You look to see if you're getting rainwater. You never blame the lettuce. But in black communities, you know what we do? We blame the lettuce. We say, what's wrong with black people? This is a question of investment. Are we going to invest in education? Are we going to invest in housing? Are we going to invest in safety? Are we going to invest in social networks? When we do, people will live to 82, 85. We see it happening in real time. This is not like some magical thing, but we also see when we don't invest, people living to 65. So I'm going to leave it there, but we're working with SHOT because we also want to look at this by gender, because we know that there's distinct differences. Investment, when you devalue black boys, when you devalue black girls, when you devalue black women, black men, it has an impact, right? And we need to tease that out. But more importantly, I look for the strength. When you find out where black men are living longer, then you're going to say, oh, what are they doing there? What are they doing in Oak Bluffs that's amazing, that we can replicate? What are they doing in Prince George's County that we can replicate? And that's when we can get into discussions of investment. So thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Andre. Karen, I think we want to open it up for Q&A, but I want to ask Dr. Perry one more question. I'm going to give you a free plug. You wrote the book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America, in American Black Cities. If you were given $1, how would you distribute that dollar? You named a lot of issue areas.
Yeah.
How would you distribute that dollar that you believe, in a way that you believe would make the largest impact on outcomes for African Americans?
You know, most people know me through my work on housing devaluation. I'm actually an education policy person. That's where I got my PhD. I started there, but during Hurricane Katrina, I started looking at school budgets and understanding that New Orleans, which got a lot of criticism about its educational level, had lower than expected school budgets. So I started measuring the value of homes. And what we found, and I'll just repeat what we found nationally, homes in black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Cumulatively, that's about $156 billion in lost equity. That $156 billion equates to about 4 million black-owned businesses based upon the average amount black people used to start their firms, would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees, covered the cost of Hurricane Katrina, the damage of Hurricane Katrina. It is more, replace the pipes in Flint, Michigan 3,000 times over. It's double the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. It's a big number, right? But the reason why we see only, black people represent about 14% of the population, but only 2% of employer firms. And my friend Rodney Sampson, who does a lot of work on investing in businesses all across the country, who's here, he knows this, that when you don't have equity, you can't grow businesses. Most people use the equity in their home to start their business, send their kids to college. If you're having trouble having a child, they use the equity in their home for IVF treatments. If you're running for office, you want to run for mayor, you pull that line of credit from your home. So when there's lower value, you have less resources to grow. So I don't ever pin it on one thing. I would love to see home ownership grow because we would generally have more wealth in our community. But we have to do invest in home ownership, invest in business ownership, because that's the number 2 factor for wealth in our country, and we know wealth predicts for so many things. But home ownership, business growth.
I had a question. After listening to the presentation, I'm kind of prepared to say that church giving, and perhaps, I think church for sure, perhaps HBCU giving, are not regarded as philanthropy. What I'm trying to say is that how do we turn on the giving DNA in the black community? That's what I'm troubled with. We don't grow up with it historically. We do know grandma takes whatever and puts in the church. We learn to give, but I don't. What's the percentage of giving for HBCUs? What is it really? Anybody know offhand?
I'm not quite sure what the giving rate. I don't. Do you remember
Dr.
what?
Lomax is not here.
Yeah,
but-
Dr. Lomax. 200.
Pardon me? No. Percentage of, if I've got, let's say if there's 100,000 HBCU graduates, how many contributed
How
to
many
to-
alumni are
Yeah,
contributing
that's what I'm
towards that?
asking. Yeah,
That
that's
I'm
the-
not quite sure.
But so, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty low. That's pretty low. All right. So in both cases, I think we don't grow the DNA, the giving DNA gene. And so I'm trying to understand how we do that.
Do you do that? Yes.
How people can view the significance of that. Now we have a platform for that, but if I don't have the gene, I'm not going to be looking for the platform. So that's kind of my overall frustration with where we go for the next 5 years.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what can we test for models to see? Oh, that got a rise, or that got a rise, and therefore people started giving. I mean, anyway, so that's what I'm struggling with.
Yes, so I love the comment that you stated, and I will tell you, so for me, I didn't grow up hearing the word philanthropy. A lot of times, when we do hear the word philanthropy, we had no idea what that meant. However, I could tell you that I had a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a grandmother and a mother who literally took me underneath their wing, and we would literally go complete community service. I would be giving back at my church. I would be giving towards food pantries. I would be supporting neighbors, things of that nature. Those are ways to be able to contribute towards philanthropy that we don't talk about. And so when we talk about informal philanthropy, a lot of times when you hear the word philanthropy, you automatically think, I have to be giving funds, I have to be giving money, or this is going to be the Bill Gates, or this is maybe Oprah Winfrey. Maybe these are individuals that you think of. However, when we talk about just the everyday giving of philanthropy, it doesn't necessarily have to consist of giving of your funds. It can be giving of your time. I will tell you the amount of people that have poured in my life over the time frame that has really helped me become the person who I am today. That's a form of philanthropy. So how do we start having those conversations and changing the narrative surrounding what philanthropy, A, what is truly philanthropy, and B, how can we start looking at those current households, African-American households, and really looking at the lives of their younger children? They stated that earlier in their conversations. I think he stated about having 5 boys that you allow to primarily give, and I do the same thing in my household with my 2 children. We sit down and we have conversations, and I say, where is it that you want to give? I'm not going to push my passions upon you, but what are your passions? Because like somebody is helping you, you need to also pay that forward to someone else as well. And so having more and more conversations about truly what philanthropy is going to be a start. But how do we now move the needle forward and start tracking that? I love case studies. I would be willing to do a case study on families, and if you have young children, and having those conversations to see the growth of their giving, and then to also see how they are having conversations with their friends, with their family members. One other thing that I would add to that, I have a colleague of mine, every year at their family reunion, they have someone literally come in there having a panel discussion, literally about philanthropy. How amazing is that? What if we did that? We have family reunions, we have get-togethers all the time. Why not have a conversation pertaining to what does philanthropy look like and how can we move the needle forward about even donor-advised funds, opportunities there. So thinking strategically about how do we embed it in our day-to-day lives, because it's always there. We just haven't done a good job of really amplifying that. So
I'll just be very quick, but let's not forget that wealth predicts forgiving as well. Wealthier people give more just because of the dent of their wealth. Because this data is very dated, I haven't looked at it. Folks, low income, essentially folks with colleges with a higher percentage of Pell Grant, actually, Black HBCUs actually give more than their equivalents in white institutions, right? In addition, I just don't want to forget this, that there are more vehicles for wealthy people to give. I mean, the SEC recently did a tremendous service in creating these crowdsourcing platforms, and Ronnie can speak to this, that now we have more vehicles where people can actually give. I think one of the things that I think is true, when you have less wealth as a community, it's almost necessary for us to have collective forms of giving. That we have a very individualistic system that if you are individually rich, you can give. But if you are low income, lower wealth, you know, we need vehicles for this. So I think right now we have the technology, these crowdsourcing systems where you can give, I know in terms of angel investing, in terms of property development. Now you can have these crowdsourcing systems where you can give as little as $1,000. I mean, a lot of people can't give $1,000. But remember, to be a certified investor, you had to be a millionaire at one point. And so we just have less vehicles. Technology can give us the vehicles, and we can see giving more and unleashed.
Hi, everybody. Incredible. All your insights are so cherished. Thank you for that. My name is Ayori Selassie. I invest in AI and data startups, and I'm working on an initiative to use AI for future cities. And specifically, I kind of have 3 questions because I'm a little selfish. But did you discover any insight around the business compositions or the different types of businesses that exist in communities where Black populations are experiencing an increase in quality of life? And then as an investor in technology, I'm wondering what came up with regard to technology in your research. Are there specific areas of technology innovation that we should be focusing on that we know can and does benefit our community? And then finally, what insight can you share around Gen Z that we can take away to be more directed towards supporting the next generation?
Well, I don't necessarily, I mean, there are some sectors that I could name, but the main takeaway, and there's no surprise here, employer firms are the biggest driver of wealth. So firms with more than one employee. And when you have a higher share of employer firms, you're going to have higher life expectancy. You're going to have greater wealth generation. And I said this stat that Black people represent about 14% of population, but only 2% of employer firms. In many places, it's less than 1%. We actually saw increased growth in business. Actually, businesses are growing. More people are starting firms now, but they're sole proprietorships. So the goal in my mind is that we need to be very specific about starting firms that can hire 100 people. And this is the other piece, and you know, we talk a lot about starting firms, starting business. We don't talk enough about merging and acquiring firms. Like we're not going to bridge this gap of employer firms simply by starting more businesses. We got to start talking about, you know what, maybe it's time for me to sell this business to buy another. Maybe we should talk about merging our businesses so that we can take advantage of this large-scale contract. And in technology, if you're not finding a way to take advantage of this technology boom, and I don't want to throw shade on neighborhood-facing businesses that are more service-oriented, we know how to do that. This is the era of really looking at a global market, expanding our wares at a global level, using AI, using technology, and you can name the sector. I'll just name one because it is fascinating. The number of utility firms, essentially utility contractors, not utility, but utility contractors that are Black. you can put on both hands across this country. They're high revenue generation, but we're not in those fields. So for me, this is about saying, hey, now's the time for us to really be focused on creating firms that can hire 100 employees. That the day of saying, I have $1 and a dream, no disrespect, we know how to do that. Let's get businesses that can scale, and if you have a business, talk about merging, talk about acquiring other firms, because that is a significant factor. I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but for every standard deviation, I don't want to use too many, you're adding months and months of years of life with business growth.
And I'll hit upon your very last question maybe before we go towards our next guest in regards to Gen Zers. So we certainly live in the technology world, and what we are seeing is that actually a lot of the Gen Zers are even giving more at a higher rate than what millennials are actually giving. They're utilizing crowdfunding, so they're able to actually give through technology online. They're giving through their cell phones. They're giving through iPads, through laptops. One other thing that we've noticed about Gen Zers as well is that communication. Communication is not going to be through mail, through indirect mail at this point. I am considered a millennial. I don't do indirect mail. If there's something that comes to me in the mail, my husband, he's about 7 years older than me. Everybody knows that dad is going to walk to the mailbox. Mom will never go to the mailbox. So again, as you are marketing and really looking to encourage really giving through Gen Zers, you want to do that through technology. So that's one specific area. Another thing that I'd like to add is that we're seeing that they're giving towards environment causes as well, and also social causes. And so those are the main specific areas. Sometimes Gen Zers are not worried about, honestly, even the cost of living. They're worried about what is taking place outside. So as we hear him talking about life expectancy, walking, things of that nature, they're looking specifically at those type of causes. They're also looking at just doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. This generation is more inclined to looking at, you know what, this doesn't feel right, it doesn't sound right, I don't want to be involved in it, I want to include everyone and not just one race. So they're more inclined to be more so realistic, holistically with everyone versus primarily focusing on just one specific race, if that makes sense. So you're welcome.
So thank you for your comments. I just have a couple observations as a gray-haired person. One, I think this is all new to us, right? So when I look at the demographics of the country, if 52% of the young people under the age of 18 are minorities, and of that number, a big chunk is Black and Hispanic folks, they're going to be entering a workforce that, whether they like it or not, is going to need them. Colleges and universities are starting to figure this out, that we can't run the world just on white kids from the suburbs. So I think that there's an opportunity here to help educate people that are going to be going into college, people that are in college. I know some colleges, before you graduate, there's like an exit, symposium that you have to go to, and a lot of it's on giving. The other thing I think is that for some of us who did not go to HBCU schools, the white universities that we go to, they're on us constantly. I mean, in town, can I have a cup of coffee with you? It's like, even when you say no 100 times, they still come after you. I don't think we see that with UNCF, and I think that that's something that those schools can think about. And lastly, we had an event a couple years ago, and we raised money to help start a scholarship at United Negro College Fund. And when I was going out to ask white folks for money to support this event, I was making the business pitch to them that your money goes up a lot further supporting these kids, because the average tuition at the schools we were looking at was like $18,000 a year compared to Ivy League schools, it was like it's $64,000. So when I explained to them that your gift of $10,000 is going to go 3 times, 4 times as far, that was for them was something that, oh, well, I know what happens if I give to Harvard or Princeton. They have more money than they need, but they're really good at getting our money out of our pockets. So I don't really have a question, but my observation is, as people of color, we're still going through this process of shaking off Jim Crow, shaking off discrimination, fighting it day in and day out, and we just can't give up on getting the messaging out and talking to our young folks. So that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I will add to what you said. You had a lot of great points there, too. And it really kind of goes back to our very first question in regards to how do we start getting the word out. One particular aspect that we've been working on through the Mays Family Institute and Diverse Philanthropy is looking at ways that we can get the Black community to engage. So who is going to have that voice? Who is going to be the representative? I can come and give data all day long, but if it's not someone that they resonate with, then it may not really sit with them. And so one specific aspect that we've been working with right now has been professional athletes. We've had the honor to work with NBA players, WNBA players right now, and so we've been helping them understand, A, what is philanthropy, how philanthropy truly drives communities, and how they can now utilize their platform. So we've had several panel discussions, several events where we've literally had professional athletes come out and talk about just their experiences and how philanthropy, how students, how young kids, young boys, young girls can really give back and do the same that they're doing, just on a different aspect, on a different level primarily. And so what I would encourage you all today to do, no, I'm not saying go out and find LeBron James. I'm not saying that. You know, if I had LeBron James' number, I could call him up right now and say, hey, I need you to talk to 1 million, young kids. However, find someone in your community that the young kids will really resonate with, that the younger generation will resonate with, even a seasoned individuals who will resonate with, and ask that individual to be the spokesperson when it comes to philanthropy. Because there's sometimes that we can say the most profound thing, but because it's coming from us, it goes in one ear and out the other. So find your unicorns in your communities, or you decide to be that light yourself and say, I'm going to make sure that we're going to move the needle forward, and really come up with some strategic, some innovative ways for us to really start having these conversations surrounding philanthropy.
Brother Taylor brought me the mic. I just want to, my name is Rodney Sampson. I want to piggyback off what my colleague Andre was saying and some of the other panelists as well. Very encouraged by this conversation. I think the intentionality of when you begin to see yourself as that philanthropist or that angel investor can't begin when we've all arrived to the point where there's no sacrifice in our philanthropy or sacrifice in our discretionary investment. I'll give you an example. Years ago, when we launched one of our first coding boot camps in Atlanta, we were taking workforce opportunity develop, they call them opportunity youth, right? Coming through workforce programs. Before they graduated to go get their jobs in tech, we brought someone in to talk about philanthropic giving. So folks were moving from minimum wage jobs to now 60, 70, then 6 figures in the future, already were being taught to how to give to a lot of those categories that you talked about, ma'am, just because they have been a benefit of it. The last thing is just looking at the density of where venture capital goes in this country. If you look at the distribution of venture capital, you can also look at a lot of those zip codes that also have those high net worth individuals and those high net worth philanthropy as well. 3% of that asset class is driving almost 100% of net new jobs in America right now. And I think as a community, we've got this new narrative that, okay, VC is not for me. Maybe the VC of just begging white folks for money, they saying no 1,000 times like the data shows, but us individually seeing ourselves as VCs in our context, using crowdfunding, using the Jobs Act, and using other legal mechanisms as well, because we all we got. Thank you.
I want to add on that because this is so important. We cannot look to the uber wealthy anymore as the guiding light. One, sometimes their philanthropy masks their unwillingness to pay taxes, right? And it is the everyday person. Do we have the vehicles for everyday people to give to the things that actually matter. And this is what I think, and I'm not, this is, John Jackson's here, I don't want it. I love SHOT because they are focused on the North Star. Too much of philanthropy is ephemeral, sort of one shot here, one shot there, and we're going to fix something in 5 years. Are we going to be committed to a movement for a generation, for 2 generations? Are we going to use philanthropy to demonstrate what can happen when policy changes? Because the reality is we're not going to nonprofit our way out of these problems. It requires change in policy. But our philanthropy plays a significant role in demonstrating what can be done. So for me, it's, I never lose sight, because I'm in a battle at times. I require philanthropy to do the research. But the reality is I want everyday people to give to the things that, that go beyond me. And so we just need more platforms that can allow people to do what they want to do, give to the things that matter. But you literally have to be wealthy to give in certain ways, and that should not be the case.
I'll let you all finish up, and then we'll thank you. You've been very generous with your time.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one final question to push us. LaKoya, you presented the data that went up to 2018 that says that African Americans give a larger portion of their income than any other group. Jacob has more recent data that says giving is going up. Richard, his question was, well, we need to do more in many respects. When I put all of that together, is it time for us to delineate between giving and philanthropic investments? Meaning, where does the GoFundMe giving trends show up in this? Because I know, I had a buddy who raises money for his vacations on GoFundMe. And people give to it.
Yeah.
That's giving. Many of us have gone to a church and there's a building fund, and one day the building will get built, but the fund has been around. So is it time to make a delineation between giving and philanthropic investments in our community?
I love that. I love that. So first and foremost, I would say, yes, it is. I think that we need to be more transparent. I will tell you, I had an entire community. I just came and gave a presentation in Florida. And one of the individuals had said, we raised money for this individual. He had lost his job and this happened. And then, we were helping his family. And then maybe a week later, he'd left his wife and he was away and the money was gone. And so now they were trying to, within that community, figure out, what do we do now? And are we going to be more, receptive to giving more funds for people who are in need because that situation had happened? So primarily, to get back to your question, is when we're looking at very specific causes and very specific passions, we just have to do our work and the resource. There are times that if we're giving to a particular cause and we don't necessarily know much about it, maybe it's because the person that came to us, we know them, and so we're giving to them. We have to begin to start giving towards a very specific cause and maybe not giving to that particular person. And I think that that's where we really need to draw the line at, making sure that we have a good and a great understanding of what we're actually giving towards, why we're giving towards it. I like to call it your philanthropic autobiography. Why is it that you personally give? Is this your particular passion? Is this going to help move the needle forward? And once you determine that, I think that you can distinguish between, am I going to give towards a church building fund? Not saying that there's nothing wrong with that if that's your passion and that's where your passions lies. Or am I going to give to a neighbor primarily that I don't necessarily know a lot about the situation? I know something, but I'm going to give just because it's going to help. Again, are we doing our due diligence in regards to why and when we're going to give to that particular cause?
Hi, my name is Dr. Keila Watkins, and I'm President and CEO of the Independent Sector. For those of you that don't know what the Independent Sector is, we are the national trade organization for the country's 1.8 million nonprofits in the country. There's a couple of things you've talked about today that are stirring me in a deep way, but this one I want to talk about in particular. What we haven't talked about today, but I think we need to, is how do we give in a way to build institutional philanthropy in our communities? That's a very different thing, because Black folks do give. When we look at the data is clear. So we do have a very strong DNA, backbone. We give, and we have stories in our family about how we give. We give money, we give time, we give energy, we give a bunch of stuff, okay? And so I just wanted to clear up any misconceptions about how we give. But I do think, to an important point, is how do we feel about giving to build institutions in our community? That's a conversation we can absolutely have. Absolutely can give an example of that, sir. One of the things that I'll give a clear example: community foundations, right? So community foundations are in mostly everybody's community, and this is almost like a collection of folks that want to have sort of individual DAF funds, or but they give in their local community. And so I used to work at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta many moons ago. And so we struggled because we only had 2 donors, and we were in the city of Atlanta, and that didn't make no type of sense. Wow. At the time I was there, I'm sure we have a little bit more now. And I knew both the donors. That's the thing, like I knew both of them, right? And so part of the challenge when we did this whole study with Boston Consulting Group, why aren't Black folks giving? And this is when we found out Black folks are giving, but they give more man-to-man giving. You struggling, brother, let me help you out. Let me take care of you. You're cheering. Let me send some money so they can go to college. We do that type of giving. We do that. But the challenge is we don't give to institutions, and part of it is that institutions haven't been great. A lot of them haven't been great to African Americans. There's been a damage, there's been an injury that has occurred in institutions. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because now we have a lot of mechanisms to bypass institutional giving, like the GoFundMe pages and such. And I think we need to sort of have a sort of broader conversation around this, because at one end, that is fine, and go on and give. Sometimes you need emergency assistance. You got to just get it and do it. But I also think there's a risk, because most people aren't going to do the due diligence around giving. I'm not going to be like, let me see your 990 and your audited financial statement. We're not going to do all that, right? I'm not going to see how well your impact has been over the... That's a professional person that does that, right? You need to be trained many years to be able to make that sort of assessment on an organization. And to expect individual people to jump up and do that, I just think that is fundamentally unfair. So that is part of what institutions do. They take on that burden of doing the due diligence, right? So when you give, not all the time, but more than most likely, when you give to an institution, that due diligence has happened. And so part of what we're struggling, and institutions in some ways support other institutions, right? So when we're talking about why we don't give to HBCU, when you brought that up in terms of why HBCU giving may be lower, if we had a Black equivalent of a community foundation, we can fund our stuff, right? And we can fund our stuff unapologetically. And so that is a challenge of how do we build institutions, because then it could get, John, it could get to your point of how do we build sort of philanthropic institutions that can last beyond sort of a crisis, an issue. Like, these are institutions can last in perpetuity, especially how we have set up and organized some of the wealth in this country.
I broke my rule, I gave you the mic.
I'm gonna shut up right now, right now. But I know. But I needed to raise this question because that's it. All right.
But I just want to be clear
Thank you.
that I'll just speak from a research perspective, that, and it was inherent in a lot of the comments, that philanthropy, in terms of the research of philanthropy, it has not caught up to the rate of giving. And so it is not captured by the data. So inherently, it looks like we're not philanthropic. That is not true. I mean, inherently, lower wealth people have to be more philanthropic to survive. Right? So for me, it is, instead of us trying to catch up to these standards, let's create new platforms that reflect the way we give. Technology enables us to do that. And I will say this, that that we are right now in a period where I've been doing this work for years, I've never seen more conversations around wealth than ever before. Now we're actually starting to talk about estate planning. We're not there. But now we're talking about it. So for me, I think we're past the place where we say, why aren't we doing this and why aren't we doing that? We are doing. Let's encourage, let's develop, let's innovate, and let's have platforms that catch up to the way we actually give.
So just a question here, but just on that, I was hoping you wouldn't say a community foundation, because in my city, that foundation has a board, and they have a whole agenda about where they're giving money, and so I don't give to them. Now, maybe Atlanta is different, and I'm not going to mention any names, but that becomes our problem.
I just want to speak to the whole idea of giving and then philanthropic investing. There's a distinction.
There's a difference.
And there's an evolution happening in our communities, right? We've grown up giving individually checks to family members, et cetera. But as our wealth builds, now we're stepping into philanthropic investing. And there are platforms out there beyond what we do, but it's having the ability to give and having those dollars amplified. Instead of giving $1, now you can give $10 because you're investing, you're letting it grow, and you're having a bigger impact than $1 at a time. So our community is going through that evolution, and the question is, are we using the right tools? Are we educated around those tools? And are people getting access to them? Right? Because there's a misperception out in the marketplace that you have to have, $100 million or $10,000 to invest. You don't.
You don't.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that comment. And so what I was going to say to the both, to find a happy medium, is that you can do both. We're not asking you to primarily just look at philanthropy as a one-off. It fits all, because that's not true, especially within our culture. And so there are going to be informal ways to give, but I think that it is also important for us to know what's out there, and so bringing awareness to, what can we invest in? Are we saying to step away primarily from the informal ways of us giving? Absolutely not. We still are going to have those rich traditions that will take place, I'm sure, for many, many centuries. But it is still also okay for us to include things that we just don't know about. And it's okay that we don't know, but start having the conversations. How can we start doing both and intertwining both the investment and then also the informal, non-traditional way to give towards philanthropy?
It's been a great conversation. Thank you, audience, for your participation. And thank you for the research and all the great comments. Thanks much.